Hi, this is Mark Spencer from Ripple Training, and this video will go over how to use the binoculars effects in the optics collection. So here I am in Final Cut Pro 10. I've got a few clips in the timeline, some stills and some video. I'm going to go to the titles browser to Ripple Optics. And here we have the 14 different optics effects. I'm going to focus on this tutorial on these first four, binoculars A, B, C, and D. I'll primarily talk about A and then look what's different in the rest. There's a lot of features that are similar, and once you understand how to use one, you should know how to use them all pretty much. So for this first clip, I'm just going to hit the X key to set a range. I'll select binoculars A and hit Q for Connect Edit, and Command plus a couple times to zoom in close. Now let's also go to the inspector where we do most of our work to modify these. Normally what you're going to want to do with the binoculars probably is to animate focus. So you do that with the focus blur control. So let's say we want to start out with this shot out of focus. So I'm just going to crank up the focus blur. And you can choose two different blur types. The Gaussian blur is much faster in terms of rendering time. The defocus can look a little more like a true lensed blur, but you can choose whichever one you prefer. Right now I'm just going to stick with a Gaussian blur. I'm going to set a keyframe there at 100, move forward in time, about halfway, and then drag it back down to 0. And if we play through that now, it comes into focus. Now the other thing you can animate here is the position and scale of the video within the frame. So let's say once we come into focus, we want to go and look up in this area here. So I've got pan video and scale video. I'll set keyframes for both of those. Move forward in time. Then let's scale the video up to look like we're zooming in. And then I'll pan it over and I'll pan it down. And now if we play through that, we come into focus and we look in on that area right there. So those are the basic ideas for manipulating the focus and zoom and pan controls. Now these other settings, you can scale binoculars themselves to make them a little bigger or smaller. You can add a ground glass effect that looks like you're looking through the ground glass of the lens. I generally keep that pretty low. And then you can choose these interface elements, what's turned on. So for example, the circle outlines you could turn on or off. You can choose how bright they are, and you can choose a color for them. Same with the tick marks inside. You can turn them on or off, make them bright or not, and change their color. The next part is these horizontal lines in the middle that you can turn on or off. You can adjust their opacity and change their color. And then the text elements. Now, before I get into manipulating them in the inspector, in order to change the text itself, the easiest thing is to double click on the title. And as of 10.0.6, you can now, it will automatically highlight the first piece of text, and then you can put some information in there. When you're done with that, if you use these arrows at the top, you can navigate to the next area of text. And then hit the escape key. These two lines here are number generators, a little different. So let's go back to the Untitled Inspector and talk about each of those. So we can choose whether or not we see the upper text or not. We can change its font. We can change its size. And you can also do all these manipulations of the font, size, and color, etc. in the text inspector if you want to. They're available in both areas. I just try to keep them all in one place here. Same with lower text. You can turn it on or off. You can change its font. I won't change it here. Font size, and font color. And by the way, if you want to change the position of either of these, you can just double click on them and then use the little handle here to move them anywhere that you want. I'll hit escape to get out of that. Go back to the title inspector. Once you're done with the text, we have the numbers. So you can choose to see them or not using this checkbox. They're animated by default. If we scroll through, you'll see that they're moving. They're animated. They change. But you can either turn on the animation or off just for one, for the left or the right or both. I'll turn them both off. If you turn it off, you can also turn off this random and just give it a value by cranking up this value here. If you are animating it, you can animate it randomly or not. And if you don't do a random, you can set starting and ending ranges. So you can animate it to go from one specific value to another. For instance, if you're looking at different height or latitude, longitude, or something like that. You can have it change there the way that you want. So I'll turn off the animation there and just set a value. And then you can also change the font of the numbers. And you can also change their position. You cannot double click on them because they are not text fields, but you can use this inspector control to change the position of these numbers. For instance, maybe we want the left one to be over there, and we want it to be like a light green. So it gives you a lot of control. You can do the same thing with the right. All these controls are simply for the right one. So same thing there. Now next is a TV effect. And this TV effect can be used on almost all of the optics. You can enable it by hitting the checkbox. And what I like to do right away is get rid of this roll so we see the screen correctly. But you can keyframe any of these things. So for instance, let's say we wanted to look at a TV effect and we want it to start with a bit of roll. So I'll crank this up. I'll set a keyframe. I'll move forward in time and set the roll value down again. And now it starts out doing a roll and then cleans up and doesn't roll anymore. You can also determine how wavy this is and keyframe any of these. Color sync, saturation, you can make it more of a black and white effect here. And scan lines, adjust the brightness of the scan lines, the percentage, and the number of scan lines. So you have a lot of control over how the TV effect looks. I'm going to turn that off for a minute. We'll come back to it. The next is night vision. Night vision and thermal vision are two different options that are available for just about every single one of these optics. So I'll select night vision, which simply gives kind of this green look, and you can choose how bright that looks. And that's about all for doing with night vision. I'll turn that off. The other option is thermal vision. If I engage that, if I enable that, we kind of blurred look, and the idea is that you see things that are hot. And you can control how blurry this is to a certain extent. It's got a bloom on it too. You can also make the bloom go up or down. Crank to the right will kind of bring it down. And then you can use these colors to determine what should be glowing. For instance, if you really want this green stuff to be glowing, we can make the green yellow. I'll drag this tag over and I'll make the green, what was yellow now more of a green or even a red. So you have pretty full control over how you want this kind of night vision, thermal vision to look. Okay, those are the basic controls for the Binoculars A. And actually, once you have these, you can turn them on for all of them. You'll know how to use them for all of them. You can even put on both thermal vision and night vision together. That'll just guide kind of a green effect. I'm going to turn both those off in this case. Okay, let's look at what's different about the other binoculars. So I'll hit X to mark this next clip. I'll choose Binoculars B and Q for Connect Edit. And the main thing that's different about this one is that this text on the top and the bottom is kind of this foreign text. And the reason it looks like that is a specific text called alien text here. You can turn it on or off. And if your text doesn't look like that, it's because you need to install the font. If I go to the text inspector, you'll see that the font is called Zentradi. We've included this font, so you'll need to install it if you want to have this sort of alien-looking font. If you don't, you can just go back and change the font in the text inspector to any font that you want, and it will look perfectly normal. Let's pick something here. You'll also need to change the tracking to 0 if you want it to look quite normal. Let's go back to the title inspector, and then if you double click on the title itself, you can change the font to say what you want. Now, right now the font is randomizing. So if we go back to the title inspector, we can choose not to animate the top and bottom text. And then those will not animate, and you can change them to say what you want. Just like the other one, you can animate the focus. You can change the focus type. You can pan the video and scale the video within the shot. You can have the ground glass effect. Pretty much everything the same that we've talked about in the first one. Also has the full TV effect, which this one is enabled by default, so you can turn it off. And then what is a little bit different is that we have these little circles. Let me give them a different color with this bright white video. And these circles animate. They kind of bounce up and down here. And you can choose whether or not to animate them by turning these on or off. Then we've got the TV effect and the same night vision or thermal vision options as well. Let's go to our next clip, hit X, Binoculars C. And Binoculars C, again, has similar controls. We can change the type of blur and how much blur and keyframe it. We can pan and scale the video within the shot. Add ground glass. Change the color of all these elements. You can change the scale color as well as the values at the end of the scale and the pointer color. Choose whether or not the pointer is animated. This is one thing that's different. If we play this, the little pointer bounces up and down there. You can choose whether it's animated or not. You can choose the range that it bounces up and down, how far it bounces up and down, how fast. And noisiness is kind of how jittery the bouncing is. So you've got full control over that. So I'll make it really jittery, but not very much distance and more frequency. And then it just bounces around that little value right there. And you can also change its position. So let's say we just want it to be around up there, close to 250, and it stays right around that level, since let's say it's measuring the height of this helicopter. You can turn off or on or off this top marker or these top numbers, choose how many decimal positions they have, how many digits they have, whether the numbers animate by default, whether they're random, and set minimum and maximum values for those numbers. Pretty self-explanatory, and of course change the color of pretty much anything in here. The text at the bottom, you can turn it off. You can blink it by hitting blink text. And then you can choose whether or not to show the background behind the text and change the color of the background. Let's turn the blink text off. Of course, you can change the font size. And again, if you double click on the title is the quickest way to get to edit the text. And then you have to go back to the title inspector. Change the font, change the text color, and then we have the TV effect with all of its controls, the night vision effect, which works pretty nicely with this particular binoculars, or this thermal vision effect. And that is Binoculars C. Now Binoculars D, hit X, select Binoculars B, D, Q, is probably the simplest one here with the fewest controls. It looks like sort of your standard binoculars. Of course, you can blur your image either way by a Gaussian or a defocus blur, pan and scale the video, and of course you can keyframe these to change over time, just like we did earlier. Crank up the ground glass, and then you can choose whether or not this matte is blurred, where you want this solid outline or you want it to look a little blurrier. You can choose how far apart these circles are, how big they are, where they are on the screen together, move them left to right or up and down. And you can just go to a telescope, a single one, and then just move that over. And you can animate this to move. So for example, let's say we want to make this a little smaller. I'll start over to the left, maybe a little bigger than that. And I'll start a keyframe for position. I'll move forward and have it go over to the right, and then realize, oops, we need to go back. So I'll move forward in time and come back. And let's say at this point we want to animate the focus, so I'll start in focus, but I'll say we're trying to focus a little bit. So I'll move forward and come out of focus, move a little forward, go back into focus. And now if I play that through, moves over, finds a target, and focuses on it. You can change the color of the matte that is behind. You can turn on night vision, and you can turn on thermal vision, and of course adjust those. In fact, in this case, let's say we want the submarine not to look black, but it's the thing that's got warmth, so I'll put green where black is, and I'll change black, the old green, to black, and now we get something that looks more like we can actually see what that guy looks like with the thermal vision. And that's pretty much how you use the 4 binocular optics. The rest of the optics, as I mentioned, all have TV effect and night vision and thermal vision, so you should know how to do that. Okay, thanks for watching.